Every tree has roots, every life has branches, and every adoption has a story. Some stories begin with questions, some begin with loss. All of them are rooted in love and the search for connection. This is Janet Monroe, and this is Roots and Branches Adoption Stories, a podcast where real stories take root and grow. Because the more we share, the more we understand, and understanding helps us grow. Now, here's Janet Monroe.
Hello, and welcome to Roots and Branches Adoption Stories. The roots represent the birth parents, the adoptee, and the adopted parents, and the branches represent everyone else that can be affected by the adoption. So today's guest lives adoption from both sides, first as a branch, when her parents adopted her younger brother, and later as a root, when she and her husband adopted their son. Kris grew up inseparable from her adopted brother, but their world expanded again years later when he found his birth mom and a sister that Kris never expected. Her own journey into adoption as a root began when she held her newborn son just 3 hours after he came into this world. Kris's story shows the beauty, the connection, and the profound love that adoption can bring into a family. Her story highlights the good in adoption. Let's dive into her remarkable journey. Kris, welcome. So
Yes.
Happy to have you here with us today and glad to hear what
Thank
you're going to have
you.
to say.
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me.
All right. So we're going to divide your story into two. We'll start off with when you became a branch. What do you remember about the day you learned you were getting a baby brother?
Oh, that is a core memory, as we say now. I was about 5.5, and we had been going through some, I didn't realize at the time, psychological testing. I thought it was just games that we were playing with other people. But one morning, the day before, it was here 2 days before Christmas Eve, my parents said, we have to go get your brother. And I was, what? And this was through the foster care system on the East Coast in the mid 1960s. So we didn't talk about adoption. We didn't talk about birth parents. It was a closed adoption at that point. But I distinctly remember the here he is, and distinctly remember sitting in the back of our car, tickling and trying to play with him and getting him to interact. And there are photos of me feeding him, because this was the day before his first birthday. So suddenly there was a 1-year-old boy in the house. And so all the fun of suddenly having a toddler in the house.
How did your parents, you were living in the West and you adopted from the East. So how did your parents?
No, we
How did that
actually,
happen?
we were living, we were military family. And my dad at that point was stationed in Massachusetts. And that's where the adoption took place. And I think you were going to ask, how did my parents explain?
Yes.
I don't honestly remember. Both of my parents were only children. And so we had, as long as I can remember, adopted, in the loose sense of the term, aunties and uncles. That's very much part of other cultures. And that's how I grew up. And so the idea of a brother was just kind of, oh, yeah, sure. Of course there's another family member, because of course there is. And mom and dad were never secretive about it, thank goodness. From early days, it was just well, he's adopted, and that's the way we do family. And the one thing I do remember that's very special was the neighborhood women at that time. Again, this is mid 60s New England, very secretive. But they showed up about a week after Christmas and did a very impromptu baby shower for my mom, which was really cool. And I distinctly remember them coming over that evening, with all the cookies and the presents, and it was really, really special.
Did you understand the meaning of the word adoption at that point in time?
Nope. No. Not all the not all the layers of it. But that a new family member was there, and that's how we did it, and that was family. And we just accept it and continue. And I can tell you that growing up, we were very much brother and sister. Being not quite 5 years older, I teased him mercilessly. And his being 5 years younger, he irritated me as much as he could. And, fast forward to when I was in high school and starting to date, it was my brother who would check on my dates, not my dad, but my brother who would check out my dates or decide I had been out too long and flash the front porch light to get me to come in. So, oh yeah. I mean, he really looked out for me and I looked out for him.
And you were a family.
Oh yeah.
So when did you notice him? What did you notice in him that made you realize that he needed answers about his origins?
In brief, my brother had a lot of big behavioral issues, and we wouldn't have a label or a diagnosis for it for many years, but eventually was diagnosed as having attachment disorder, as well as bipolarism. And when he went in his, I want to say late 20s, early 30s, and had the agency finally open the files, mom and dad had always been told that he was a failure to thrive baby, a sickly baby. That's why he had been in and out of the hospital in that first year that we missed. We found out decades later, when the files were finally opened, that his foster family, his foster parents had actually abused him to the point of broken bones. And that's why he'd been in the hospital so much. So that first year that is so vital for bonding with healthy adults in a loving family was completely upended for him. He never got the appropriate attachment. And mom would say to me years later, that she could always tell that I was his safe place. And if you think about it, child to child, that made sense for what he had been through. But unfortunately, at the time, we didn't know it. He went to have the files open specifically, as you mentioned, to find his birth parents, and did eventually find his birth mother, who was still living on the East Coast. And the day after he made contact, she jumped on a plane and flew to where he was then living. And it just, he just had another mom all of a sudden. And again, going back to how I was raised, it was like, oh, there's another auntie now. I mean, I could have cared less that there was another mom in the picture. It was like, well, he has two moms and I have another aunt, and okay, fine. But then I found out, to answer a question you haven't asked yet, he had a half sister, and that's when I got jealous. That's when all of a sudden it was like, wait. I'm the sister. What do you mean he has another sister? No. I'm the one who's been here all along. He's my brother. He can't be anybody else's brother. And I had to get over that pretty fast. But there was a change in him after he found his birth mom, after they connected. There was a calm that wasn't there before. It was like a big question had been asked, why, and had been answered. And she was able to give him information that nobody else in the family could give him. And that was huge. And the cool part was a couple years later, our parents all met. Our mom and dad went and met her and her then partner and had a wonderful dinner. And it just, again, family, right? Family. It was never about, it's never been about blood connection. In my family of origin, it has always been about who is your tribe, who is your crew that will be there for you.
I was brought up that way as well. I came from England to Canada in 1958, and we had no family here. So my
Yeah.
parents just got friendly with anybody else who was English because they were here with no relatives either, and that's how we
Right.
became. Everybody became an aunt and an uncle, and it was
Yeah,
just easier. Yeah.
exactly. And when you're in the military, that's not uncommon because when you get sent to a new base or a new assignment, you don't know anybody. You don't have, neighbors that you don't know your schoolmates. You don't know people at the local house of worship. And so, military understands military, and we quickly support each other. The interesting part was the neighborhood we were living in when my brother was born was not on a military base. And yet the neighbors were just so supportive. And the neighbor who organized the baby shower for my mom ended up becoming my brother's godmother later on. So yeah, that's how we do family.
Did your brother find out the reason why he was taken for adoption?
Yeah. And it is the typical story that we all think of, very young single mother who realized that she could not raise him by herself. And at that point, birth father who did not want to be involved, sadly. But that's kind of the story we all think of when we think of adoption. And I'm just so grateful that they met, that they connected, and for my brother that solved some of what was missing for him as he was growing up.
I know, especially in the 60s, an unwed mother was someone who was looked down upon. A child, if they kept the child was a bastard, and it just wasn't something people wanted to happen to their child. And adoption
And I
was
don't know, and I don't know how he ended up in the foster care system on the East Coast. I'm not sure how that worked at that point. Now we know the foster care system has changed enough in the United States that now we know it's very, very different. But you're right. At that time, there weren't a lot of options for a young single woman.
And most young single women went to a home where they were amongst other young single women that were in the same position as they were, and babies were born and just disappeared.
Right. And she had always wondered, what had happened to this, beautiful boy that she had given birth to. And, so I don't know enough about how she, what she thought when she heard from him, other than the proof that she got on the plane the next day. But if I had been in that situation, I know there would have been a hole for me as a birth mother.
And I can understand what she went through because at that time when I found my son and I first spoke to him, just the emotions, the memories that all come rushing back to you, and all these feelings that you've buried for so long, and all of a sudden it's just there, and it takes weeks, months to get through them all, and to be able to accept that was your past, and now you have to look to the future. You know? So I'm guessing that he has a relationship with his birth mom now, and they keep in touch.
Yes.
And with his new sister.
Ooh. Yes.
Are you still jealous of the sister?
No, but if I flash back to what my reaction was then, it was just so funny. It was just a moment of like, what do you mean? Huh? Wait, I didn't sign on for, you always know that if you have an adopted family member, there's a part of you that always recognizes, yes, of course, there's a birth mother out there and a birth father out there. What do you mean there's a sibling? You don't realize that your sibling has potentially all these other siblings. So that was a moment. Yeah. And fortunately, mom and dad were happy for him. They recognized that he needed that information, and they put together a huge stack of photos of my brother over the years, so that his birth mom could see, he was in Cub Scouts, and he served at church, and, he went on these camping trips, and, all these different things that he had experienced over the years, so she could have glimpses into what life had been like for him.
And I got the same kind of book from my son's adopted mom.
That's really cool.
Yeah, she sent it out as soon as she knew about me, and I was amazed to receive that. And Dwayne found he had a brother and a sister through me. And then when he found his dad's side of the family 2 years later, he found he had 6 brothers and sisters. So his whole family just multiplied.
Wow. That's incredible.
So, all right. So now let's go to when you became a root. Here we go. When did you and your husband realize that adoption would be your path to parenthood?
We had been married 5 or 6 years. We had been trying to have a baby for another 5 years after that. And I now live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we saw the top specialists here for fertility. And with IVF, they gave me a 1% to 2% chance of becoming pregnant. We didn't know at the time why. They weren't willing to spend the time to figure out why. It was simply this isn't in your path. And I literally had one doctor say to me, the best path forward for you is adoption. And I thought, well, I've seen that path before. And I was ready. It took my husband a little bit longer. I think that, for some people, it's not an immediate, well, of course, that makes sense. We'll just go that way. Some people really want a genetic connection. I didn't see the need for it. So that probably took us another year or so. But when we finally decided this is the path forward, we opted for private adoption. I ironically was working with, at that point, a nonprofit that helps teens in crisis. And I had seen what was happening in the foster care and adoption system in our counties, our local counties at that point, and decided that it just would be easier in the long term to do a private adoption.
And what was the process for your private adoption?
Oh, finding the right attorney, and working with the attorney, and man, that in itself was an interesting situation, because there are some attorneys that just want to go advertise in all the papers or advertise online in all the places for a birth parent, which just seemed to me, I'm really rooted in making emotional connection. I know you can't tell. And it was important to me that our attorney connect with the birth mothers. And that's fortunately what our attorney, that was her process. And she did it by talking to social workers around the country. And it turned out that one of the social workers that she connected with was at the county hospital in our area. And that's how eventually we connected with birth mom, who gave birth to our beautiful boy.
And then you said that you met your son just 3 hours after his birth.
Yes, which was almost exactly 20 years ago today. His birthday was just a few days ago. We got a phone call. And let me just say, we had been looking for about 6 to 8 months. Our attorney had been trying to match us from people from around the country, literally Florida to California. And there were a couple of adoptions where we had been considered by birth mom and then had fallen apart because birth mom had chosen someone else or chosen a different direction. All of them valid, all of them I completely understood. But it was like almost like losing a pregnancy, because it was like, oh, baby's coming. No, baby's not coming. And after wanting to be a parent for so long, it was hard. So here we were at the beginning of December, holidays coming, no baby again. Really, really, really hard. And we got a phone call. I was at work. My husband was at work about 10:45 in the morning, and saying, oh, by the way, baby's being born at the county hospital right now. How fast can you get there? And my husband and I said, immediately. We'll be there immediately. And I can tell you, because I was thinking about this the other day, the moment I looked at my watch is the time that's actually on my son's birth certificate. So I literally was having the phone call when we were told that is the time on his birth certificate. We got to the hospital, and about 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours later, it was like, hi, here's the baby. And I'll never forget, ever, ever, ever forget, because here we are finally holding a baby, and we looked at each other. I mean, we joke about having a 3-hour pregnancy. Nothing prepares you for that. There's a reason why nature takes 9 months, right? Kind of slowly get used to the idea. Hi, here, have a baby. And we were thrilled and stunned and all the words you can use, gobsmacked, shocked, and held him as long as they would let us hold him. And finally around 6 o'clock, I think they finally shooed us out and said, you guys really need to go, you need to go eat something. You need to go home and sleep. And of course, we're like this, we're so excited and so anxious about the whole thing. But the thing that really stuck with us was nobody had said, oh, by the way, you'll take this baby home in a few days. I mean, this was still is this our baby? We don't know if this is our baby. And next day got to go in and meet birth mom, which was hugely important to me, having seen what my brother had gone through. Unfortunately, I only got about 15 to 20 minutes with her. She opted to have no contact with our family for a variety of personal reasons that I completely understand. And interestingly, now that our son is an adult, he has opted for no contact. Again, reasons his own. But let me see here. He was born on a Wednesday and we brought him home on Saturday. And I think the thing that blew us away was Friday afternoon. The nurses in the maternity wards and the social worker all said to us, well, mom has signed her letter. You're taking your child home tomorrow. Are you ready? We had nothing. We had no crib. We had no diapers. We had no clothes. We had nothing. And we ran to the local store and filled a cart with formula and diapers and everything that one needs for a baby. And Saturday morning, went and brought him home. And like every new parent, I had to laugh. My husband probably drove 10 to 15 miles under the speed limit all the way home very carefully because he didn't want anything to happen to the baby in the back seat. And I assure you that baby was fine.
Did you
So,
rename the baby?
yes, actually we did. And birth mom was not going to name him, and then at the last minute did give him a name. And we had been considering other names. My son is Latino. He's Mexican American. And at the last minute, after she gave him a name, we had been looking at other names. We did end up giving him a Latino name, but it is different. And that's okay. And, we've talked to him over the years and said, if you want to add one of these names as a middle name or you want to change your name, and he's decided that no, he's okay where things are, and that's fine. And it's important, honestly. I think I mentioned to you, my younger brother, again, being 1 year old, my younger brother had a name. And my parents were asked, do you want to change the baby's name? And my mom said, no, he's had this name for a year. Why would we change it? Somebody gave him this name for a reason. Well, it turns out that in his birth family, my brother's first name is the name, it's a family name that was handed down and the name of their Scottish clan. So it was really important years later when his birth mother found out that he had retained his birth name. It was really important. In our situation, it was really clear that birth mother wanted something on the first birth certificate, and she also indicated to us she'd be fine if we changed the name. So, we were very careful. We walked through it cautiously, just knowing that, we didn't want to undo any connection that was there.
What did both adoptions teach you about the courage of birth parents?
Oh, that's a huge question.
I
That's
know
a
it
huge
is.
question. You didn't prepare me for that one. Knowing how much I wanted to be a mother, I cannot imagine. I literally don't have the words for what it would take to give up a baby that had come from me, or that I even had seen as mine for a while. I cannot imagine. And I've actually talked to foster parents who have been in a foster adopt situation for a year or 2 years, only to find out that other bio family has been found for that child and they're now relinquishing to that bio family. And I know how devastating that has been for them. So I cannot imagine birthing a child and then making the decision for whatever reason to say this will be better for all involved if I relinquish this child. I understand why my brother's birth mom did it. Again, early 60s, New England, closed adoptions, totally get it. And I do understand why I talked to my son's birth mom, and she explained why. And, for reasons that need to remain private for her, I understand why she did it. She was a woman in her early 30s with another child. She was single at the time. And I understand. She gave us an incredible gift. Again, there aren't words or language big enough to express. I just, it is such an amazing act of love. But there just aren't enough words.
I was speaking to a young lady last week, and She was adopting from the foster system.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, the mom had already signed off, but the dad finally said to them that the most loving thing I can do for my daughter is to let you adopt her.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And that, what
and
an
that's true.
incredible, yeah. What an amazing thing. And what a loving thing to do for two people you've never met, right? I mean, it's not just about the baby. It's also about, our attorney told us that many, many times the reason why, one of the things that will drive a birth mother is that she sees that this couple really, really wants to be a family and that they're not, and they can't be. And one of the greatest acts of love she gives is, you can be a family with this child of mine. Wow. It's just, I get goosebumps just thinking about it.
So how did your childhood experience with adoption prepare you for becoming an adoptive parent yourself?
Nothing prepares you for being a parent. I don't care how you come to it. Having
Whether it's
having just
adopted or natural?
having just survived the teen years. Whew, um, wow. I think because I saw in my brother the big question, and we mentioned this earlier, the why. Why did this happen? Why did this person or these people let go of me? Why did they give me up? Which I hate that phrase. But I knew that my son would have questions. I knew that, those questions would start probably at a young age and would change as he got older. And so from the beginning, we've been very transparent, and sharing age appropriate information as he asked the questions. I've never withheld anything from him. And I actually have more information than he has asked about. And when he's ready, we'll share it. But I'm
Like
grateful that I saw, I'm grateful that I saw as a sibling, the kinds of issues and questions that could come up. And I don't think you can prepare for everything, but at least you can see, and the benefit that mom and dad gave us, not just him, but us as siblings, was honesty. They were transparent, from the beginning. Kind of hard not to be when a 1-year-old suddenly shows up, right? But they were very transparent. And that helped us as a family, and now helps my family.
So what would you want other families to understand about the good that adoption can bring?
Oh, wow. Yeah, didn't prep me for that one either.
Well, sometimes it's easier that way.
Yeah, that's true. The good. There are a lot of ways to become a family. You'll hear people say it. Until you experience it, though, I don't know that I can adequately express. This is my kid, for better, for worse. This is my kid. And he's done some typical, teenage behavior. Thank you very much. We won't go into it now. But you're going to be a family. And, if you cannot have a child biologically, or if you want to add to your family, and I've seen families with some children want to adopt also, adoption can be a really beautiful way to do it. I hesitate, though, and I want to be sure people understand, if you go into it thinking you're saving a child, that is the wrong mindset. You must go into it saying, I want to be a family. I want to be a parent. I want another child, or I want a child. This will complete our family. That has to be your mindset. Nobody's rescuing anybody here. This is about creating a family in a different way. And our son said to us when he was, I think, first or second grade, that we were the strongest kind of family because we had 3 people and the triangle is the strongest shape. So there you go.
I like that.
Yeah.
Your son sounded very smart for grade 1 or grade 2.
Yeah,
Right?
he's an old soul in many ways. Yeah.
So in his teenage years, he was a typical teenager. Because I know when my daughter and son were in their teenage years, I would gladly have given them back if I had somewhere to give them to.
Oh, there were days. But you also then, are careful with your language, right? Because you don't want to say, oh, we're just going to
Yes.
leave you out on the sidewalk, right? You have to be very aware that, no, that might kind of hit differently with your kid than it does with other kids. But our son knows that he is the light of our lives and sometimes takes advantage of that. And, and he also knows that we have each other's backs in this family and that that's what family does.
When you went for adoption and you were going through the private adoption through a lawyer, what kind of costs are people looking at? You said that you can't sell a baby in the U.S.
Right.
But
that's
there
child
are
trafficking.
Costs attributed to adoption.
Right.
Yes.
Well,
there are costs attributed to that.
Right. 2 things. Obviously, we cover the court costs, right? We cover our legal fees to go through the process of adopting this child. And let's be very clear, you cannot pay for a baby in the United States. That's child trafficking. But the practice is paying for birth mother's living expenses, either her medical care if you've met her before the birth, paying for her medical care, living expenses, and then something after she gives birth. Or in our case, knowing that birth mom was going to have to recover from giving birth, we paid for a few months of living expenses after birth so that she could take time off of work, get back on her feet, provide for her daughter, our son's half sister, all those things. So that is the standard in the United States. And I don't believe that there are any laws around that. But I know that that is the expectation.
Thank you. That tells me a lot that I didn't know before, that I wasn't sure about. So thank you for joining us for today's episode of Roots and Branches Adoption Stories. Kris reminds us that adoption doesn't just change one life, it shapes entire families across generations. From being a big sister through adoption to becoming a mother through adoption, Kris shows us the beauty and the goodness that can come from saying yes to a child in need of love. If today's story touched your heart, please subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with someone who may need it. Until next time, stay curious, stay open, and remember, every story has roots and every family has branches. This is Roots and Branches Adoption Stories. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to Roots and Branches Adoption Stories, where every tree has roots, every life has branches, and every adoption has a story. Got an adoption story you want to tell? Want to learn more about adoption stories? Then visit rootsandbranchesadoptionstories.com.